Hey everyone, Nubkeks here, and welcome to today's video, where we're taking a look at the Vengeance Demon Hunter on the Shadowlands beta for World of Warcraft. Yesterday we took a look at Havoc, and of course we'll be taking a look at all the different specs and classes over the next few weeks or so. And any major updates that come out for the classes. Of course it's beta, so everything is subject to change, and I'm expecting, and certainly hoping for, a second pass or so on a lot of these different specs. Certainly Vengeance is one of those. Alright guys, so let's start this off by looking at some of the new abilities and all of the different talent tweaks that are coming in for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. We've got a really cool new ability coming in. Let me just generate some Fury here. And actually that's one thing worth noting, is that instead of using Pain, we now use Fury, which is, you know, like 10% less edgy, so that's probably an upgrade for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. But the new ability we have, or at least new baseline ability, is Fell Devastation, which now has a 45-second cooldown. This is a talent that was never taken before, and it looks like this. It is basically, oops, the tree got a bit in the way there, but it's basically I-Beam for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. It's their version, which is super cool. Costs 50 Fury, 45-second cooldown, 2-second channel that does about 2,000 damage to enemies in front of you, and will heal you for about 5,000 health, or up to 5,000 health based on damage done. So this is awesome, and one thing you'll have noticed, a new talent to replace Gluttony. Gluttony was a talent that, consuming our little soul fragments, would have a chance to put you into Metamorphosis. So the problem with Gluttony was that, well, there's a couple of problems, but problem number one was that it was very passive. You didn't have any control on it. It was just these random procs. Well, coming again from Havoc Demon Hunter, we have Demonic, where Fell Devastation will cause you to enter demon form for 8 seconds after it finishes dealing damage. So this turns Fell Devastation into a really, really crucial part of our active mitigation. Metamorphosis, of course, is our major defensive cooldown. It's extremely potent, extremely powerful. And just to get to illustrate the power of this demonic talent, right? Metamorphosis itself on a 3-minute cooldown gives you 15 seconds of demon form. Demonic gives you 8 seconds, so it's like half the duration of meta that's tied in with this from Fell Devastation every 45 seconds, which is super, super cool. So this is a big positive thing for sure. And I definitely think that this is one of those abilities that if you go from playing the beta, right, it's like Shadow or Death for Shadow Priest, for example. When you move from playing it on the beta and you go back to live servers, it's going to feel so bad not to have this. This feels great in AoE. It's AoE burst damage. It gives you another active mitigation thing to play around. So big thumbs up for me. Phenomenal ability to have coming to us here on the Vengeance Demon Hunter baseline. Super, super welcome. We got a few little buffs to our stuff as well. So Demon Spikes gives you more armor now, so that's nice. A little bit more armor there. And Soul Cleave now also has been buffed by about 20% damage, but it does have a 5 target cap, which ties in very much to the target caps of a lot of other characters. I mean, that's sort of a topic for a bigger video, is the target cap video. But yeah, it's sort of in line with changes to other things. So there you are, just something that is worth noting. So yeah. Now, talents have seen a lot of tweaks, an awful lot of tweaks. One massive improvement that you're instantly going to notice is that we no longer have offensive talents sharing the same rows with defensive talents, which is, again, just an absolutely massive and positive thing. It was a very big problem in BFA that you had the former Gluttony competing with Spirit Bomb, which either meant that you had to choose between Spirit Bomb and having actual decent AoE damage and decent threat in dungeons, or Gluttony, which meant having decent survivability. Felt really bad to have the two of those share the same spot. That stuff has now been split up, and we've got a few different talent builds. There's an Immolation Aura talent build, which I've spec'd into here, and other stuff, so it's quite nice. Let's actually start from the bottom up, because it's a bit more simple that way. But like level 50, we have a new talent here called Bulk Extraction, right? So it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, instant cast, demolish the spirit of all those around you, doing 300 fire damage to nearby enemies, and extracting up to 5 lesser soul fragments, drawing them to you for immediate consumption. So this is kind of nice. Like it doesn't have much of an animation right now. Let me show it to you. It's just sort of like the Immolation Aura, like first tick. That's basically what it does. And again, it doesn't really, it's a bit bizarre to me, you know, demolish the spirit. Oh my god, how much damage am I gonna do if I'm demolishing their spirit? Like 300. it's really not much, you know, 1/3 of a fracture to everything, which is, it's a bit wonky. But nonetheless, hey, it's an extra cooldown, and with some tuning, maybe this could be really, really nice. Ruinous Bulwark is a new talent here as well. That goes Fell Devastation. Fell Devastation heals for an additional 15%, and 50% of its overhealing is converted into an Absorb Shield for 10 seconds. The thing is, you're almost definitely going to be running Demonic, and when you're running Demonic, this is really unnecessary. You're already in a massively powerful defensive, like one of the strongest defensive cooldowns in the entire game with Demonic here. So Ruinous Bulwark, I think, is very much overkill. And then we do have Last Resort still there, which is our cheat death that puts you into meta, which is super potent. So for me, like this tier, it definitely needs a bit of work. I'd like to see some love for bulk extraction. I mean, for the most part, I feel like you're just going to go for Last Resort. So it would be nice to see this come up, or maybe some tweaks to this one, up its damage or something like it. Give something else on this row to make it a bit more varied. Level 45, again, similarly, we've got Demonic here, which is awesome. Soul Barrier sort of shares the same. It's the same from BFA, right? And it sort of shares the same space as Demonic does. And Demonic is just such a much more powerful cooldown that going from like a relatively mediocre 30-second cooldown versus having an extremely potent 45-second defensive cooldown, I feel like you're just going to take Demonic all the time. To compete with that, you do have Void Reaver, which is basically the sort of the passive, consistent damage reduction, 6% less damage from everything that to you from everything that you hit with Soul Cleave. So at least you got that sort of to balance it out. But yeah, a couple of tiers where you've got maybe a couple of choices, but you're mostly going to be going for these two, I think. Sigils on level 40 are still the same. Level 35 then is sort of a defensive row. You could take Fracture, which basically makes a Shear twice as good, I would say. Let me see if I can exit combat here. I can actually switch them up. There we go. So like Shear, Fracture basically makes Shear twice as good, but has it work on a charge system, which feels really good to play with. And then you've got Soul Rending, so some Leech, which isn't as good at all, and Feed the Demon, where consuming Soul Fragments reduces the remaining cooldown of Demon Spikes, which is pretty nice, right? So just higher uptime on your active mitigation. Then we have these top three rows, which are sort of a bit more varied up, right? Bit more varied up. So Abyssal Strike is still there. It no longer has the range component to improving your Infernal Strike, which is fine, right? You're still going to jump really far. It's still going to proc those Sigil of Flames and make your Infernal Strike a bigger damage-dealing thing. Then we have a lot of talents that are going to tie into Immolation Aura. The first of these being Agonizing Flames, right? Immolation Aura increases move speed by 20% and duration by 50%. This ties into Legendaries, Conduits, lots of different stuff. So kind of interesting to see they're really working on Immolation Aura being more of a build path. And then you have Fellblade, which is underwhelming because it doesn't have any soul fragment generation to it. So that, again, needs a pass. It's quite a common theme, I think you'll see with this Vengeance tree and the reshuffle, is that you've got like 2 good talents on a tier and 1 kind of dead talent. So there's definitely another pass needed on these. Hello. A level 25 Feast of Souls. Soul Cleave heals you for 1000 over 6 seconds. Relatively bland. Fallout still the same. Immolation Aura making more or lesser soul fragments, so that's really good. And then Burning Alive every 2 seconds. Fiery Brand spreads to one nearby enemy. This has become more interesting by virtue of some Fiery Brand legendaries and conduits and stuff like that. At level 30 then, this is quite an intriguing one because we've got Spirit Bomb, and I do want to say a little bit about Spirit Bomb here for sure. But before we look at that, things competing with Spirit Bomb: Infernal Armor, Immolation Aura increasing your armor by 20%, and melee attackers suffer 56 fire damage. Charred Flesh, this is an intriguing one here. Immolation Aura damage increases the duration of your Fiery Brand by half a second. And hence we have this sort of build here, right? Burning Alive, my Fiery Brand is going to spread to nearby enemies. Immolation Aura is going to last longer, and every time Immolation does damage, it's going to spread my Fiery Brand. So, for example, over here, I can show this to you. I Fiery Brand this guy, Immolation Aura, and you can see it's spreading around, and you can see those durations are slowly ticking up, right? And you can see how long this Fiery Brand is actually lasting. So that's pretty intriguing, right? That's pretty intriguing. Fiery Brand being, of course, a 40% damage reduction. So that build, I think, you know, it definitely is. It's a different build, right? It's a different sort of playstyle from what Vengeance Demon Hunters are used to. Spirit Bomb, I do have to say a bit on this. Spirit Bomb, to me, is... I'm going to be very unpopular for saying this. It's a very degenerate talent, and I would love to see them take another big look at Spirit Bomb. I think it's really bad. It's super popular. Vengeance Demon Hunters love it. Here's the problem for me, is that Spirit Bomb consumes 5 soul fragments to explode to on nearby enemies, doing 250 fire damage per fragment, and obviously it heals you by sucking those fragments up, and then it inflicts enemies with frailty, which is nice. Problem is that this does so much more damage than Soul Cleave, because number one, it already does, like, you know, for 30 Fury, it already does more damage, but then it's also fire damage. So like 1,250 fire damage versus 781 physical damage. It does a lot more single target damage because it's not reduced by armor, and a lot more AoE damage because it's not reduced by armor. It also has no target cap. The problem with this is that it really incentivizes you to just overcap on Fury and not really pay attention to Fury at all, and just generate soul fragments until you have 5 and then just consume it. And then you can use Soul Cleave like kind of to dump Fury while you don't have any soul fragments out, just so you're not consuming those soul fragments while you wait for Fracture to recharge. Like, it's just a bit wonky. I don't think it's good. It's not an intuitive playstyle. I'd like to see something like Spirit Bomb either not have the consume soul fragment thing, but have a cooldown, or, you know, yeah, have like a bigger Fury cost or something like that. It should be a button that you do press, but it shouldn't be a button that essentially changes your whole rotation and replaces Soul Cleave in a very unintuitive way. That's my thoughts on it. For me, I will say the interesting part for Vengeance Demon Hunter, someone who dabbles in tank, I feel like the managing your Fury and your soul fragments should be relatively passive, right? Should be something that's just your core rotation, and there's a little bit of gameplay, like, okay, I'll bank up some Fury, I'll bank up some soul fragments for a damage hit, and then I can spam some soul cleaves and that comes in. That's good gameplay, but relatively straightforward. And then the bigger gameplay, I think, should be really playing around your demon spikes, should be playing around your Fell Devastation demonic windows and your fiery brands and your meta. That to me is more interesting. I don't think that your rotation should be that finicky, but that's my thoughts on it. But there you are. Let's take a look at the legendaries here and see how those are going to combine, because we have some pretty interesting stuff. First of all, we have there's 4 generic legendaries, which are for all Demon Hunter specs, and then there are 4 Vengeance specific ones as well. Generic ones, first up, Metamorphosis increases your size, movement speed, and melee range by 100%. This is currently bugged, it does not work. And for Vengeance, I really don't see the use of this. I could see the use for Havoc in PvP, perhaps, for some stuff, but for Vengeance, I don't know. I think increasing your size is particularly dangerous. So yeah, I like, it's just gonna make you get hit by more stuff. We'll see, but yeah, I don't know about that one. Another one here, Umbrahide Leggings. This also seems pretty terrible. You automatically trigger Darkness when you fall below 35% health. The effect can only occur once every 2 minutes. Darkness, it puts down the darkness cloud, and that's a 20% chance to avoid each instance of damage. So it's very, very unreliable. The usefulness of darkness is more as a raid cooldown, just get multiple people in the darkness and then at a low chance to make them dodge damage. It sort of averages out to be relatively useful over the full size of your raid. I feel like this is super clunky. I don't know, I just don't, again, I really don't see the use of this versus running the Vengeance Legendary, so disappointing one there. Shadowgas Necklace here. The Fell Devastation has a 20% chance not to incur its cooldown. This is obviously going to feel phenomenal when it goes off. The issue again is that it's super, super unreliable. You're casting Fell Devastation every 45 seconds. Right? So it's going to take an average of that. What's that, every 45 seconds? So you're going to cast every 5 of these. It's not quite 5 minutes, but it's close to 4 minutes. It's like 3 to 4 minutes on average is how often you're going to see the Fell Devastation reset come in, right? So that's in a raid fight, that's, you're gonna get 1, 2, if you're very lucky, maybe 3 resets in a very long raid fight. You know, most raid fights you're looking at 1 to 2 bonus procs because of this, which is just terrible. Like in a dungeon, you're typically looking at maybe, 7, 8, 9 or so, maybe 10 resets if you're very lucky. Which is just, I don't know, it's just very clunky, very unreliable. So that's definitely disappointing to me. And also, I think the issue with Vengeance here, compared to Havoc, where I-Beam resets is just a perk, with Vengeance, I think, because Fell Devastation is essentially, with Demonic, a big defensive cooldown, you kind of need to plan your usage of it, and you need to be planning your defensives around it, and how you're going to pull and how you're going to approach the boss. Because there's only a 20% chance to reset, you cannot plan to be using this defense. You have to have your stuff already planned as if you would not have this proc. So when it does proc, there may be some circumstances where it's just a straight up bonus, but oftentimes it's just going to be overkill, and you're going to be using it in a situation where you wouldn't have actually used it. This one is quite cool, this cape. Casting Fell Devastation summons an allied Havoc Demon Hunter who casts Eye Beam. So this just looks hilarious. It's just some extra damage, but it looks pretty damn cool. So hey, I cast Fell Devastation, and then to my right, my Havoc Demon Hunter buddy comes in and he does an Eye Beam. More damage, which is nice. It looks super fun, so I'm fine with this legendary. It's not going to like really change your gameplay, but it looks badass, so that's always good. Then we have 4 Vengeance ones. First up, this one. Your Fiery Brand now heals you for 100% of the damage done, and each enemy hit by your Sigil of Flame increases the instant damage of your next Fiery Brand by 15%, stacking up to 15 times. Unfortunately, I can't show you this because it seems to be bugged, but you can obviously work out the maths for yourself. Fiery Brand, by default here, is doing 1,500 fire damage. If we increase it by 15%, stacking up to 15 times, it's like, let's say roughly a bonus 200% damage, right? So it's going to hit for maybe like 4,500. So it's going to end up being a pretty chunky self-heal. One thing to note, of course, is that you're going to have to get quite lucky with Sigil of Flame to stack this up to a high level. Or most likely, you're going to have to run Abyssal Strike. And you're also obviously going to need some AoE to make this work. But Abyssal Strike is going to give you an additional Sigil of Flame every 12 seconds with Infernal Strike, right? On top of the 30-second cooldown. Or sorry, in this case with Quickened Sigils, it's 24-second cooldown. So that is something to note, that it does sort of push you into this talent to make it work, but it could be kind of cool. We have these leggings here. Soul Cleave reduces the remaining cooldown on a random sigil by 8 seconds. This one I think is super fun. The sigils are a really, really fun aspect of the Vengeance Demon Hunter. They are your utility aspects, so you've got, you know, Sigil of Chains, which is pulling things in, Sigil of Misery, which is going to do an AoE Fear, Sigil of Silence, which is your AoE Silence, and then of course Sigil of Flame, which is your AoE damage. Also, the Kyrian Covenant ability is a sigil and does get affected by this. So yeah, I think this is a positive thing. It's going to feel nice in Mythic Plus. You're going to have your utility things up more often and be able to interact with the packs in a very interesting way. For me, like I said, these are some of the most fun parts of a Vengeance Demon Hunter, so thumbs up on this one. This is actually a really good legendary. Then, here's where this sort of Fiery Brand build comes into it. We have this Umberhide Arm Guards. Each soul fragment consumed by Soul Cleave reduces the cooldown of Fiery Brand by 2 seconds. Pretty nice. Let's actually test it out here. Let's see how we're going to do. Let's see what our sort of uptime is going to be on these guys here. So let's go for it. We want Fiery Brand, pop our Immo Aura, and we're not going to do like the most optimal rotation. We're just going to sort of maximize Soul Cleave relatively as much as we can. We'll try not to move to get the cooldown reduction. And again, you can see how long that Fiery Brand is lasting. It's fallen off my main target. Okay, and there we go. And you can see it's actually down here to 20 seconds, right? Which is phenomenal. Massive cooldown reduction there from those Soul Cleaves and consuming those Soul Fragments. We're almost ready to go back in. You can see, in fact, Immolation Aura is not quite going to be back up, so I'm going to have to delay slightly here. Okay, that's good enough. I'm back into Fiery Brand. So I think that's a really cool legendary. I am running a Conduit that gives me 5 seconds cooldown reduction on Fiery Brand right now. And as that scales up through the expansion, you definitely could be seeing these builds which focus on high uptime Fiery Brands. Again, you can see we're down to 25 seconds by the time that final Fiery Brand expires. So that's a very, very interesting one, and definitely brings Fiery Brand into a more prominent part of our toolkit and really opens up this alternative build. Then another one that ties in with Immolation Aura here is this one. In this case, it's a waste. You take 15% reduced magic damage while Immolation Aura is active. With Agonizing Flame increasing the duration of Immolation Aura by 50%, this becomes a 14-second cooldown and will get lower with haste, right? And has an uptime of 9 seconds. So that's 9 seconds out of every 14 seconds with 8% haste, where I'm going to have that 15% reduced magic damage additionally. So this, it's very passive. It's not really that interesting to play around, but it's going to be a very powerful choice and will make Vengeance Demon Hunter a very attractive choice in magic damage intensive tanking scenarios. So if there are some raid bosses which do a lot of magic damage, Vengeance Demon Hunter could start to look very, very appealing in those circumstances. And there you go. Those are the legendaries. On the whole, I think they're relatively okay. Again, I will go back and say that Spirit Bomb then also becomes a problem talent. And I'm sorry, because it's popular and people love it. Spirit Bomb is awesome, but it is a problem talent because we've got these two legendaries which are all about Soul Cleave and consuming soul fragments with Soul Cleave. Problem is with this one, Spirit Bomb really disincentivizes you from pressing Soul Cleave. So there's a clear design issue there. I think rework Spirit Bomb and this stuff starts to fit a lot more naturally. And again, just push baseline damage, just up the damage of Soul Cleave more, up the damage of Sigil of Flames, up the damage of Immolation Aura. You know, whatever. Like, work in that AoE damage, that AoE threat, up the damage of Fell Devastation. Work it into your baseline kit and not be so reliant on this as your AoE thing. That is definitely something that we'll have to see. Does that happen with tuning or does it not? We shall see. Let's go take a quick look at the Conduits as well. Looking at the Conduits for the Vengeance Demon Hunter, we're actually in luck. The last patch just added some of the potency ones in for us, so we can take a look at all of those. And the way these work is they go into, if I show you an empty soulbind tree, there's going to be slots for finesse conduits, potency conduits, and endurance conduits in these trees. And they've sort of been rejigging how these trees are laid out and all that sort of stuff. Like, the trees have changed for this particular patch on the beta. So bear in mind that this stuff is still quite subject to change. But endurance conduits increase your survivability, potency, your damage, your healing, and finesse ones give you utility. We have 3 endurance ones so far for the Demon Hunter. First of all, we have Fell Defender. The cooldown of Fiery Brand is reduced by 5 seconds. Vicious Ink, Demonic Wards, also reduces magic damage taken by 8%. Demonic Wards for the Vengeance Demon Hunter by default reduces all damage taken by 15%. You get an additional 8% magic damage reduction. Very strong. And then Shattered Restoration. The healing of Shattered Souls is increased by 10%. So, I mean, honestly, all of these are really, really nice for Vengeance Demon Hunter. Obviously, the Fiery Brand one ties into the talents and legendaries that work with Fiery Brand. Getting 8% reduced damage taken from magic, just baseline, is incredible. And yeah, then 10% more healing from Shattered Souls, which is the main source of your healing. So these are all really strong for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Next up, we have the Finesse Conduits. Ravenous Consumption. Consume magic has a 15% chance to dispel a second effect. I feel like in PvE, this is very, very rarely going to be useful. It's obviously going to be kind of nice, though, in PvP, for sure. Fellfire Haste. Your movement speed... I mean, PvP, though, not super relevant for Vengeance, is it? Fellfire Haste. Your movement speed is increased by 5% after casting Infernal Strike. I feel like this is quite minor, not going to have a huge impact at all. 5% is not much. Maybe at a higher tier, a higher level, this would be more noticeable. Demonic Parole. Enemies that leave you in prison are snared by 50% for 5 seconds. So that's obviously noticeable, but again, it's more of a PvP thing, I would say. Not going to be particularly useful in PvE. Maybe some weird kiting circumstances in Mythic Plus, but probably the best one overall. And then finally, Lost in Darkness increases the duration of Spectral Sight by 3 seconds. It's just terrible. Purely really a PvP type thing. Really underwhelming there, I'm afraid to say. Now, for Vengeance, we actually have... excuse me, this should be up here. We have 3 Vengeance specific ones. There's one I'm not sure if it's supposed to be Vengeance or Havoc. I believe it's an overlapping potency conduit that works for both of them. So I don't know if we're going to get... Like, most specs have 4. But seeing as we have this one here, Growing Inferno, Immolation Aura's damage increased by an additional 10% each time it deals damage. This obviously works for both specs. So I'm not sure if that's just the 4th one for each, or if we're going to get more. Time will tell. But yeah, Growing Inferno, pretty interesting, right? Immolation Aura damage increased by an additional 10% each time it deals damage. Obviously in AoE, this could add up to a lot, and especially when you combo it with Agonizing Flames, which increases the duration of Immolation Aura by 50%. So that's pretty nifty, actually. Then we have, in this case, this is the Covenant-specific conduit. See, this is really underwhelming. Increased Scrutiny. Reduce the cooldown of Sinful Brand by 1 second? It's like a whole new game. 1 minute, 59 seconds. They're a world apart. Wowee, super exciting. Sarcasm aside, we also have then... interesting. These are actually endurance conduits. My bad. Isn't that interesting? Okay. I totally misread. Okay, good thing I checked these here. We actually have more endurance conduits. My bad, my dudes. My bad. Separate these out. At least a little bit. Okay, so we actually have... These are endurance conduits, not potency. Again, I suspect that's a bug. I suspect it might be a bug, but just so you know, these are currently labeled as endurance conduits, so they're fairly substantial though, and more so in line with what the potency conduits are for the other specs, but just bear in mind. Roaring Fire. Fell Devastation heals for an additional 30% based on your missing health. Okay. Demon Muzzle, Sigil of Silence, reduces magic damage done to you by 5% when it ends. And then finally, this one is definitely a potency conduit. Every 10 soul fragments you consume increases the damage of your next soul cleave by 15%. Man, I'm a bit reluctant to comment too much on these, considering that they might actually be endurance conduits here. I mean, I feel like I get in niche circumstances, maybe they could be okay. Honestly, I feel like none of these are really going to stand out too much. Like, they're nice little bonuses, but relatively passive and not something that's really going to change anything that you do, or change anything that you're going to play around, would be my sort of thoughts on it. The one that I definitely like the most, obviously, is Growing Inferno. I think that's just going to feel pretty good with the Immolation Aura build. So there you go. But yeah, at least right now, no reason, I think, to really overly worry about going down a path with lots of potency conduits for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. Okay, the first Covenant we want to look at here is the Venthyr. This one's looking really powerful. First of all, the signature ability for Venthyr is Door of Shadows, 1 minute cooldown, 35-yard range, 1.5 second cast time, wend through the shadows, appearing at the targeted location. So it's essentially a point and click, cast time, teleport. You could teleport over abilities in the raid. You could maybe skip some stuff in Mythic Plus, that sort of thing. I'd say for Vengeance, it's not all that exciting, seeing as we already have Infernal Strike, so we're already extremely mobile, leapy boys, but it is there. More exciting for the Vengeance Demon Hunter is the Sinful Brand, and this is very, very tasty. 1 minute cooldown, 30-yard range, instant cast. Brand an enemy with the mark of the Venthyr, reducing their melee and casting speeds by 30% and inflicting almost 5,000 shadow damage over 8 seconds. On top of that, activating Metamorphosis applies Sinful Brand to all nearby enemies. First things first, this does a crazy amount of damage. To put it in perspective, like, our Soul Cleave hits for about 800 physical damage, and that gets reduced by armor. Fracture, which is pretty much our hardest hitting thing, let's see what it does in terms of armor. Like, Fracture's hitting this Raider's training dummy for like 300 damage, because that's reduced by armor. It's 900 physical damage, right? This does shadow damage, so it's not reduced by armor. And it does 5,000. It does 5,000 damage. Bam, it's ticking for 1,230 per tick. Absolutely crazy. It's so much damage, guys. It is so much damage. On top of that, for Vengeance in particular, this is obviously a good single target defensive CD as well, reducing melee attack speeds and casting speeds by 30%. That has a lot of uses. That's going to feel pretty nice as a bonus little defensive cooldown there. So that's cool. And then when you combo this with Metamorphosis, bam, Sinful Brand on everything. So 5,000 damage to everything near me is just insanely good. Fell Devastation, to give you some context, is going to do just under 2,000 damage. That's on a 45-second cooldown. So adding a 5,000 damage AoE to everything with your Metamorphosis is insanely powerful. On top of which, of course, you're going to be applying those casting and attack speed debuffs to everything in AoE as well. That part is maybe not quite as useful, considering that you're already in meta, so you're already super survivable, but you're going to be super mega crazy survivable with meta. And yeah, you're going to be able to do some crazy pulls potentially in Mythic Plus with this, because that is such a massive chunk of damage and a massive chunk of survivability. It's certainly an intriguing thing to consider. So yeah, Sinful Bland, it's certainly not bland. Sinful Brand, it's pretty amazing. An extremely powerful Covenant ability, and possibly the best one for the Vengeance. We shall see. Next up, we have the Crash. Next up, we have the Kyrian abilities for the Vengeance Demon Hunter. First up, we have Summon Steward. It's actually just on a short cooldown. We'll be back in a second. But the combat effect of the Summon Steward is that it gives you a Phial of Serenity. You can consume this to restore 15% health and remove all diseases, poisons, curses, and bleeds affecting you. I actually think this one's quite nice for a Vengeance Demon Hunter. It gives you that self-dispel, which can be very potent. Like if you think about King's Rest, for example, in BFA, and like the extremely damaging bleeds that you could get on you as a tank there, having the ability to dispel that is situationally extremely potent. This is our Steward, by the way, so he'll run over and give us this, and you can vendor gear to him and stuff like that, change your talents, which is nice. Then the big Covenant ability for Demon Hunter is going to be very familiar to a Vengeance Demon Hunter. It's Elysian Decree, which is a 1-minute cooldown. Place a Kyrian sigil at your location that activates over 2 seconds, which will do 1,300 arcane damage and shatter up to 3 lesser soul fragments from enemies affected by the sigil. So it's another sigil. Add it to your collection of various assorted sigils. In comparison to Sigil of Flame, with this armor set, Sigil of Flame is doing about 500 damage, right? Some of that as a dot. So this is doing about just over twice as much, like somewhere between 2 to 3 times as much damage as your Sigil of Flame. And yeah, obviously it also has the it also has the soul fragment generating effect attached to it as well. I didn't actually mean to cast it there in the ground, so let's see it against a dummy instead. Okay, so here we are. I actually figured out what the problem there was, which is very interesting, which is that because this is a sigil, your sigil affecting talents will actually interact with this. So with concentrated sigils, it will actually cast the Elysian Decree under your feet. With the quickened sigils, it will actually make it activate faster and give it reduced cooldown, so that's very cool. And then obviously the legendary that we have as well, which reduces a random sigil's cooldown, will also affect this one too, which is very intriguing. And this is what it looks like. Bam! Nice damage there, very cool. Again, compared to our Sigil of Flame, it's going to be more upfront damage without the dot effect. And obviously making the 3 soul fragments is going to be very, very nice. Like if you run with Spirit Bomb, for example, that's a good combo. Making those extra soul fragments to get off extra casts of Spirit Bomb is going to feel really good, and it just translates to some extra healing. Then next up we have the Night Fae with Soul Shape and with the Hunt. This one's a bit dodgy. Good news, I guess, for Night Fae people is that Soul Shape did just get buffed in the last beta patch. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown instant cast, indefinite in a rest area, or a 12-second buff in combat, which turns you into a Vulpin, increasing movement speed now by 50%. That was a big increase. It's now 50% movement speed, and you get a teleport that teleports you forwards 15 yards. You can see it actually instantly activates the teleport as well when I cast the spell. So, you know, maybe we'll have some use to it for sure. It definitely feels a lot better than it did before, I will say that. The teleport feels much better, and the movement speed is nice. Is it useful for a Vengeance Demon Hunter who's already very mobile? I'm not entirely sure. And then the Covenant ability for Demon Hunter is the Hunt, which is a 3-minute cooldown, about a 1-second cast, a 50-yard range, charged to an enemy, doing 2,800 nature damage and rooting them in place for 3 seconds. Target is marked for 1 minute, increasing the fury from shears against them by 50%. And you may reactivate the Hunt every 30 seconds to teleport behind the marked target. So it looks badass. Look at this. Wee pew! I'm a rocket ship. Hooray! And then my shears are going to generate bonus fury. 50% bonus fury. So instead of 10 fury, I'm going to get 15. It kind of works in the sense that Soul Cleave is 30 fury. So it's going to be 2 shears for Soul Cleave versus 3 shears for Soul Cleave. But yeah, here's the teleport. It's a rogue Shadow Strike, basically. This one I honestly think is pretty awful. It's pretty terrible. I can't show you the tooltip actually until the Hunt itself expires on this guy. This seems just really, really weak. The damage component of it is very poor. It's not going to provide you anywhere near the same amount of damage as Sinful Brand, which is 5,000 damage every 1 minute compared to like 2,500 every 3. It's going to provide nowhere near the same amount of damage as Elysian Decree will for the Kyrians either. And then it's also really bad for target swapping, right? I cast this on a target. I really want that target to be alive for the full minute. So it's going to be good against bosses. Okay, great. It's good against bosses. But it's not going to be great against any enemies that are going to... Like, if I'm fighting a tough mob, but it only lives for 20 seconds, I'm going to lose a ton of value here. The root effect also doesn't seem much use to me. And teleporting behind the target for a tank doesn't seem useful either. Here's what I think. I'm going to be honest with you here, guys. I think the Hunt sucks. I think it's terrible. I think that this is interesting for a Havoc Demon Hunter in PvP. I think it's pretty questionable for a Havoc Demon Hunter in PvE. I think it's pretty terrible for Vengeance Demon Hunter in PvE. And, okay, it might have some use if you can use it to exploit some, like, flag carrying tactics or something as Vengeance in PvP, but you're very rarely actually playing Vengeance in PvP, and it's so bad in PvE, I just don't see Night Fae. I see Night Fae as being not really a thing. Unless you're a hardcore PvPer and it ends up being better than Sinful Brand does in PvP, Night Fae in the hunt. Big thumbs down from me. Sorry. And then finally, I wish I could say I saved the best for last, but this is another very weird one here for Vengeance Demon Hunters. We have the Necrolord. Fleshcraft is their signature ability, and this one again is pretty alright. You can form a shield for 20% max health, channel for 4 seconds. This has a 2-minute cooldown, and it lasts for 2 minutes as well. So that's kind of nifty. Again, you can maybe use this in Mythic Plus to do some kind of cool stuff. If you channel near a corpse, you'll claim more of their essence, and the shield will go up to 50% max health. So I actually think that this part of it works pretty okay. Like, I can think about this in Mythic Plus. You know, it could be kind of nifty. You go, like, you clear one pack. Once you've killed that pack, you know, channel your Fleshcraft, get that 50% max health shield, and then, you know, go leaping about the place with your Infernal Strike, pull a bunch of mobs, and bring them back to your team. And the Fleshcraft shield will help keep you safe while you're doing that. Like, that seems relatively useful. A bit harder to actually use in combat, though, because it is a channel. You can't, like, block or dodge or parry while you're channeling. So that makes it quite clunky. And I don't know, like, will it be better than just doing your rotation and getting the defensive benefits from that? Bit of a question mark. Then the Covenant ability is Fodder to the Flame. It's a 2-minute cooldown. Commission a duel to the death against a condemned demon from the Theater of Pain. Vanquishing your foe creates a pool, releases its demon soul and creates a pool of demon blood that lasts for 30 seconds. Fighting within the pool increases your attack speed by 20%, reduces the damage that enemies deal to you by 10%. And a bonus, Fleshcraft will treat the condemned enemy as a powerful enemy. So use your Fleshcraft beside his corpse and you'll get the full 50% shield. Thing about Vengeance, so our Shattered Souls, right? Consuming a Demon Soul gives you 20% increased damage for 15 seconds. Okay? That was cool when I looked at Havoc Demon Hunter, because it's a 2-minute cooldown. Metamorphosis was a 4-minute cooldown. So you're going, okay, every second Fodder to the Flame will sync up with our Metamorphosis as Havoc. You'll get that Demon Soul damage buff. You'll get the attack speed buff in the pool. That kind of works out. For Vengeance, though, Metamorphosis is a 3-minute cooldown. I'm just not really seeing what use we're going to have of the Demon Soul and the 20% damage increase. Let's commission a duel to the death with this one. Okay, cool. Let's start smack her around a bit. Put down her sigil. Okay, whatever. Let's hit her with the Fell Devastation. Okay, she's dead. And there you go. So here's the pool. The pool is this big. Lasts for 30 seconds. And yeah, I mean, we can run around in it. That's okay. We can do our Fleshcraft shield. Now, the Fleshcraft shield is going to be very, very big. Like, that's a big shield. 18,000 shield channel beside it. So that's definitely something of a perk. And the cooldowns do sync up 2 minutes and 2 minutes. So that kind of works. But yeah, it's a bit clunky. The attack speed is kind of meaningless. I feel like the damage increase from this is relatively meaningless for us compared to Havoc. You essentially have a pool that you stand in for 10% damage reduction. Like on a 2-minute cooldown, is it worth it? That's the question. Is it worth it? I don't really know. I don't know. I'm not sure that it is, compared to just having the extra sigil, which is generating 3 soul fragments every 1 minute with Elysian Decree and being really good in AoE, or the Sinful Brand, which is really good damage in single target, and the AoE burst with meta. I don't know. This one is clunky. And I definitely feel like it works better with Havoc than it does with Vengeance. Half the benefits just don't seem like that much of a benefit. So, yeah, I'm a bit skeptical. And there you go, guys. That is a quick look, or not so quick look, I suppose, at the Vengeance Demon Hunter on the Shadowlands beta. For me, I'm relatively positive about the Vengeance Demon Hunter. I think there's some things that are good about it, and some things that aren't so great. I definitely am happy to see Fell Devastation and Demonic coming in baseline to the toolkit. I think that's a really good change and awesome to see. And it's great to see the stuff like Soul Cleave start to get its damage buffed up a bit. I'm definitely happy about that. A question mark for me remains with more in-depth testing with logs and with maths and all of that stuff to see how it stacks up in terms of its damage output compared to other tanks. Like, are we actually going to feel good in AoE damage? Because that was a big problem for BFA, was that AoE damage and threat as a Vengeance Demon Hunter felt terrible. Like I already said, I think Spirit Bomb remains a big problem for the spec. I would really, really like to see Spirit Bomb talent be reworked. And then have some of the reliance that we had on Spirit Bomb for most of BFA in Dungeons just baked back into the baseline kit. I mean, hopefully Fell Devastation and Soul Cleave buffs will achieve most of that. But yeah, that's sort of my hope there. I think our talent tree has been much improved. There's room for improvement still, of course. There's some terrible talents. Spirit Bomb is a problem. But there's a lot more good talents in there, and the talent tree just makes more sense. So that's definitely a big improvement. I think with the Covenant abilities, you've got 2 really good options with Sinful Brand and Elysian Decree, and then you've got 2 terrible options with the Hunt and with Fodder to the Flame, the Night Fae and the Necrolord. So that's definitely a weird one. I felt like most Covenant abilities have been pretty good for most of the specs I've tested so far, apart from Vengeance. Vengeance is the one where it stands out, where 2 of them are just clearly way ahead of the pack in usefulness compared to the other 2. So that's definitely a concern for Demon Hunter. Like, if you want to play Demon Hunter and you want to play both specs, which I think is more likely now that they've made Vengeance a little bit more similar to Havoc in terms of how it plays with Fell Devastation, it's looking right now that you're definitely going to be pushed towards either playing Kyrian or playing Venthyr. If you want a Covenant ability that's actually really good for both of your specs. Like Venthyr right now, Venthyr looks like it is probably going to be the way to go. So there should be, I think, more balancing, because that's not what you want to see, and it's not what Blizzard wants to see. I do think that the Conduits are not too exciting for Vengeance. Like, they're okay. Not too exciting. And the Legendaries are... Again, they're okay. They're not overly exciting, but they're decent-ish. They're decent-ish enough. They're certainly better than the Havoc Legendaries. Let me put it like that. And I think you put all that stuff together, and what you have essentially is a very fun spec. You know, Leapy Boy, it's cool. Playing with sigils, the utility of sigils is super fun. Leaping around the place is super fun. Turning into a demon, Fell Devastation, really, really fun. And for me, I also really like the active mitigation design for Vengeance Demon Hunter, where you do have significant downtime, but then you also have got these significant and powerful tools to sort of weave between each other. There's certainly a concern that compared to other tank classes that might have more reliable and higher uptime out of active mitigation, that, you know, Vengeance might feel a bit squishy. Like, it might feel a bit too swingy in terms of its health bar. That was also a problem in BFA for some of it. So that's definitely still a concern, I would say. For me, I will say in terms of game design, I like the Vengeance design more. I think it's active mitigation, not like passive always up mitigation. So I think Vengeance does it really well. So like I said, it's good and it's bad. I think that you have the potential of a super fun class there. It just needs, you know, it does need a bit more work to make sure that every single part of the kit actually does feel good together and make sense. So yeah, one to keep an eye on. I think Vengeance will be very, very fun. You'll have a fun time in Mythic Plus. You're going to have a fun time in Raids as well. It's cool. It's a good spec. And yeah, that's what I think about Vengeance. We'll see how it turns out in terms of balance. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.